Well, that's a difficult act to follow. I'm here to talk about rivers. Well, thanks. I'm kind of psyched about them myself. So, rivers in our culture tend to be afterthoughts. We tend to use them for many things: drinking water, power generation, agriculture, recreation, and transportation. But rivers tend to be very far from the front of our consciousness. And I'm here to challenge that notion. I believe that rivers can shape us in many positive and profound ways, and that they deserve our deepest attention. I like the way the PowerPoint's sort of doing its own thing right now. I've been very fortunate over the last 20 years to spend a lot of time in and around rivers. I've worked as a commercial river guide, I've been an outward bound instructor, and I teach a course on rivers. And I have become increasingly convinced that rivers can and do shape us as civilizations, as cities, and as individuals. If you stop and think about it, I don't know what's going on with the PowerPoint, I'm sorry. If you stop and think about it, rivers really have served as the seat of our civilization. Our earliest communities were established around rivers because rivers provided that which was necessary for survival. The Sumerian Babylonian people emerged from the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, the Egyptians emerged from the Nile River Valley, and the Harappan people came from the Indus River Valley around 3500 BC. The presence of a river in a largely desert area allowed for lots of people to live in one place at the same time, which led to cities and then ultimately to civilizations. Without rivers, we would have had no civilizations. We never would have been able to move beyond small, disparate groups of people existing via hunting and subsistence farming. So anyway, let me back up a sec here. So anyway, the presence of these rivers in largely desert valleys, again, it allowed large groups of people to live together. And as a result, we have civilizations. And so I think it's safe to say that civilizations, to some degree, do serve as the underpinnings of our civilizations. It's no wonder then that the ancient peoples viewed rivers as gods in many cases. Nick Middleton writes in his book, Rivers: A Very Short Introduction, that the powerful hold rivers have on humankind is embedded in innumerable myths, traditions, and sacred rituals throughout the ages. And an example of such a sacred river is the river Styx in the ancient Greek tradition. The ancient Greeks believed that the river Styx formed the boundary between the land of the living and the dead, and that it was an all-encircling river that actually had miraculous powers, in that if you were dipped in this river, you became immortal. And you've all heard of the hero Achilles. He was dipped in this river as a baby, and except for one part, his heel didn't get dipped in the river. And as we know, that didn't turn out very well for him, because in the Trojan War, he got struck in the arrow in the heel, and it killed him. The point, though, is that the ancient peoples believed that rivers could provide almost complete protections. And so I think it really is safe to say that rivers serve as the underpinnings of our civilizations, both from a sacred and a community perspective. Now I need to leap forward several thousand years to the time of industrialization. And during this time, we began to use our rivers in a very different way, in that we began to force them to be used in industrial and in manufacturing ways. And so what happened is this wasn't very good for the rivers. And stories abound of rivers that became endangered as a result of overuse, of pollution, and really of a changing worldview. We no longer view our rivers as sacred. Instead, we viewed them as resources, something to be used. And this use gradually became misuse and to some degree abuse. Fortunately, in the last century, it became apparent that such abuse could not continue, and we began to clean up our rivers. And so, as these rivers were restored to health, a new respect came for these rivers. And so, as a result, we were able to then view our rivers in a slightly different way. And so now we need to turn to the concept of urban rivers. And urban rivers, as you can tell by the definition, are rivers that just run right through cities. And so there's a really interesting study out of the Netherlands that seems to indicate that communities which respect their rivers via protections and in some cases enhancements, these rivers tend to have populations that are financially wealthier, the people in those communities are more socially connected, they're physically healthier, and they're happier. An example of such a river is the San Antonio River in Texas. In the late 1930s, a visionary businessman and the then mayor thwarted an attempt to divert the San Antonio River through an underground storm sewer. Instead, they developed a project, or they spearheaded a project called the San Antonio Riverwalk. And the Riverwalk is this beautiful shop and tree-lined course for the river which winds through downtown San Antonio. And it became a major economic driver. In 2015, there was a report that came out that said that the San Antonio Riverwalk contributes $139 million annually to the economy of San Antonio. So this seems to support what the study from the Netherlands says, but now we need to turn to the idea of physical health. There's very interesting research being done in the field of neuroscience, which seems to indicate that time spent out in nature, in particular when that time is around water, results in positive changes in our brain structure as well as its chemical concentrations. And these studies focus around the concept of neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is our body's ability, our brain's ability, to continually, over time, form new neural networks in response to our physical environment. And this happens throughout our lifetimes, not just when we're young. Our brains are forming these new neural networks. And what's exciting to me about this research is that the studies are showing that when the physical environment is water, that very positive changes come about in our brains that result in more positive mental and emotional states. In the words of Nick Middleton, the author of Blue Mind, he writes that water, and by extension rivers, provide a profound shortcut to happiness. So, while much of this to this point has been pretty theoretical and somewhat esoteric, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to tell you the story of a river trip. Because as I mentioned, I've worked as a commercial river guide on and off for the last 20 years. And in 2010, I led a river trip in the Grand Canyon for an organization called Team River Runner. And Team River Runner, basically, its mission is to take wounded veterans and get them out on the river. Because the founder of Team River Runner, this guy named Joe Mornini, he believes that getting these vets out on the river can help them heal in ways that traditional therapies cannot. And I agree with him. So, as I mentioned, in 2010, we did this Grand Canyon trip with Team River Runner. It was a 14-day-long trip. And these types of long river trips really are the most powerful because you're able to get into the flow of the river. You leave behind all the distractions of our modern world, our jobs, our cell phones, that sort of thing. And we end up connecting with something ancient, primal, and deeply alive, the river. So on this trip in 2010, we had 10 veterans on the trip with varying degrees of disabilities. The most able-bodied of the guys, and it was all men on this trip, the most able-bodied of the guys captained kayaks, others paddled in paddle boats, and those with the most severe injuries rowed in the oar boats. And I was rowing one of the oar rigs on this trip, and a guy named Pete rowed with me every day of the trip. And Pete was former Air Force Special Forces, and he'd been injured in a bad vehicle wreck. He had little to no use of the right side of his body. He'd suffered a traumatic brain injury, and at this point in his recovery, he really was still just learning how to talk. And so Pete and I spent a tremendous amount of time together. As I mentioned, he rode on my boat every day, and he was a really curious guy. He wanted to go to law school once he was healed enough, but I got to where I could understand him speak pretty well, much in the same way a parent can understand their toddler children. So one day, as we're floating down the river, Pete starts to tell me a story of his time in Iraq. And part of his job in Iraq had been to call in airstrikes. He was a Special Forces air controller. And so he's the guy who would guide the planes in on airstrikes. And so one day his unit gets intelligence that they need to hit this area. And so he guides the planes in. And after the airstrike is over, Pete and his unit go into this area. And it turns out they had very incomplete information, and there were multiple civilian casualties. And Pete felt deeply, deeply responsible for these deaths. He felt a lot of guilt and a lot of self-recrimination. But telling his story did seem to bring him some relief. And later that afternoon, as we're pulling into camp, we're floating in the eddy, he looks at me and he says, "I've never told anyone that story before." And you know, it was interesting. After that, I swear his speech began to improve. Not dramatically, but it was definitely noticeable. He was enunciating his words more clearly, and his sentences began to make more sense. And I wasn't the only person who recognized this. Other people noticed it as well. It really was quite amazing. So the ancients believed rivers to be sacred and mystical places. We tend to view them more pragmatically as sources of water, power, and transportation. But I believe the rivers can and do shape us. They've shaped our civilizations, they can shape our cities, and they shape us as individuals. The modern world is injurious to a very large degree. Much of what we deal with on a daily basis, noise, traffic, stress, work, the incessant drumbeats of our electronic devices is not good for us. But rivers are good for us, very good for us. Rivers can heal. Rivers can heal communities. Rivers can heal individuals. I believe rivers to be deeply profound places that deserve our collective attention. They deserve a place in the forefront of our consciousness. If we take care of our rivers, they will take care of us. Thank you.